This conference will now be recorded.
I'll start the class now. So today's topic is induction of labor. Today we'll discuss briefly about what are the indications, what is the definition of induction of labor, what are the indications, what are the contraindications, and what are the criteria to induce a patient for the labor, and then what are the methods for induction of labor. So coming to the definition of induction of labor, it is an intervention which is designed to artificially initiate uterine contractions, and this should be done before spontaneous onset of labor. And the pregnancy should be a viable pregnancy, and it should be a term pregnancy. And coming to the aim of the induction of labor, it is to achieve a vaginal delivery with either with or without rupture membranes. And next is the indications, which are where all will induce a patient for labor. The conditions like which benefit the mother and fetus, which outweigh the continuation of the pregnancy. These are all indications for induction of labor. And before inducing a patient, we should take into account all the maternal conditions, fetal conditions, and the gestational age of the mother, and then the cervical status. Coming to the indications for induction of labor, we'll take into consideration the fetal, maternal, and both maternal and fetal complications. Coming to the fetal complications, we'll go with IUGR, RH insemination, and any intrauterine fetal death. We'll go with the induction of labor. And maternal conditions like renal diseases, chronic hypertension, and autoimmune diseases and diabetes mellitus, in all these conditions will go for induction of labor. And coming to the pregnancy complications like gestational diabetes mellitus or any antepartum hemorrhage like abruptio placenta especially, and in post maturity, that is after term, and gestational hypertension, preeclampsia, eclampsia conditions, PROM, all these conditions will go with the induction of labor. And coming to the elective inductions, in a term or post-term conditions, we can go with elective inductions when the patient has not attained spontaneous uterine contractions, then we'll go with the induction of labor. Coming to the contraindications, contraindications are same as that for a spontaneous labor or delivery. Those conditions where we are not going for a spontaneous labor or delivery or vaginal delivery, these are all contraindications for induction of labor also. So coming to the contraindications, vasa previa, that is vasculature at the cervical junction, lower uterine segment, and complete placenta previa, umbilical cord prolapse, previous transfundal uterine surgeries, and active genital herpes, cervical cancer, distorted pelvic anatomy, and babies with more weight, birth weight like more than 4 kgs, 4.5 kgs, will not go with the induction of labor. And hydrocephalus, where the head will be enlarged, and any malpresentations like breech, occipital posterior, or transverse lie, oblique lie, and non-reassuring fetal status, and umbilical cord prolapse, all these conditions will not go with the induction of labor. And what are all the criteria before going with a cervical ripening or induction of labor? First, we have to counsel the patient regarding the pros and cons, benefits, and what are the complications, what are the contraindications, and all these we have to discuss, and we have to take proper consent from the patient and attenders also. Then we have to go with the induction of labor. And the next step will be first we have to assess the gestational age. How do we assess the gestational age? We'll discuss later. And then we have to see the Bishop score. That is for whether the cervix is favorable or not favorable. We'll go with the Bishop score. And then we have to assess the pelvis. If any abnormal like contracted pelvis or cephalopelvic disproportion is there, then we'll not go with the induction of labor. We'll do either cesarean section or we'll do cesarean section. And the next one is the assessment of the fetal size and presentation. All these should be done before deciding a patient for induction of labor. So among these, first is the confirmation of the term gestation. This ACOG, that is, it defines a term as 38 completed weeks, and according to this, the certain criteria will be there. Like fetal heart sounds should be documented for at least 20 weeks by fetoscope or 30 weeks by Doppler, and with the it should be a 36 weeker from positive beta HCG, that is during HCG confirmation of pregnancy, it should be around 36 weeks. And ultrasound measurement, a CRL obtained at 6 weeks, 6 to 12 weeks, suppose the gestational age of 39 weeks should be there. And if the ultrasound, which is done at 13 to 20 weeks, it should correlate with the clinical and history and physical examination of the mother. And the next is the Bishop score. Depending upon the Bishop score, we'll assess the favorability of the cervix. So first we have to see the position of the cervix and then the consistency. If the position of the cervix is posterior, intermediate or anterior, depending upon that, we'll give a score of 0, 1, 2, 3. And the consistency of the cervix also we have to see. If it is a firm consistency, we'll go with a 0 score. And if it is intermediate, 1, and soft is a 2. Next is the effacement. We'll discuss effacement, dilatation, fetal station now. This effacement, it is nothing but the shortening or thinning of the cervix. See, either non-pregnant or patient who has not, where cervical deepening is not there, then we'll see a cervix which is 0% effaced. This is a 0% effacement. That is, the cervical length will be around 3 to 4 centimeters. And with the progression of labor, the effacement, there will be shortening or thinning of the cervix. And this is 100% effacement of the cervix. And this generally, this is seen either before or during early labor. So this is the effacement. We'll see the effacement. We'll describe it either depending upon the percentage, that is either 0 to 30% or 40 to 50%, 60 to 70% and 80%. If it is 80%, we'll give a score of 3. And next is the dilatation of the cervix. So this is the dilatation. Before onset of labor, the cervix will be closed and it is uneffaced. And with the progression of labor, see, there is some dilatation in the internal os. And here it is almost fully dilated, and it is almost 10 centimeters dilated so that the fetal head can be delivered. So dilatation, it is 0 centimeters, 1 to 2 centimeters, 3 to 4 centimeters, and if it is more than 5 centimeters, we'll give a score of 3. And then the fetal station, that is depending upon the station of the fetal head, that is, if it is at the pelvic rim, then we'll call it as 0 station. And if it is above that, we'll go with the negative values, -1, -2, -3. And if it is below the pelvic rim, we'll go with the +1, +2. If the station of the fetal head is around +1 and +2, we'll go with a 3. So this is a station of the fetal. This is at the pelvic rim, that is a 0 station. If it is above the pelvic rim, then it is a -5. And if it is below the pelvic brim, we'll go with a +5 station. Depending upon the station, we'll give the scoring system. And if a Bishop score, it is more than 9, it is an indicator of highly probability of successful induction of labor. And if it is less than 4, that is if effacement is not there and dilatation is not there and position, all these are the scoring is less, then we'll go with the ripening of cervix. So coming to the methods of induction of labor, this method of induction of labor, it depends upon the favorability of the cervix. If there are unfavorable factors, then we'll go to ripen the cervix. And if there are favorable points in the cervical ripening, etc., then we'll go with the oxytocin or surgical amniotomy. In unfavorable conditions, we have to ripen the cervix. What are all the techniques we'll use to ripen the cervix means we'll go with either mechanical methods or pharmacological methods. In pharmacological methods, we'll use a prostaglandins. Mostly we'll use a dinoprost, that is PGE2. Either we can use in the gel form or vaginal insert or vaginal suppository. And the other form is a PGE1. This is a misoprostol. These are the pharmacological techniques we'll use to ripen the cervix. And the mechanical methods, generally we'll use a hygroscopic cervical dilator or any transcervical balloon catheter can be used. Apart from these, we'll use a membrane stripping. That is, we'll strip the amniotic membranes. So what is a cervical ripening definition? This is also a part of induction of labor, and it is done when the cervix is unfavorable so that it will facilitate dilatation when labor is established. So this is the cervical ripening. Coming to the methods, as we discussed, there will be mechanical methods and pharmacological methods. Coming to the mechanical methods, we'll discuss hygroscopic dilators. These can be either natural or synthetic dilators, osmotic dilators. The natural will be the laminaria tents, that is Laminaria japonicum. We'll use some laminaria tent sticks. We'll insert in the os, external os and internal os. Then they'll absorb the endocervical and local tissue fluids, and the device will expand, and it will lead to dilatation of the cervix. And synthetic osmotic dilators will also be there, that is Lamisil. And coming to the mechanism of action of these dilators, these will absorb the endocervical and local tissue fluids, and the device will expand within the endocervix, and this helps to dilate the cervix. Coming to the advantages of the hygroscopic dilators, we can place these under the outpatient placement, and then we can ask the patient if she has uterine contractions or if the 10th laminaria or these dilators have fallen down. And no need for any fetal monitoring. These are the advantages. And coming to the risks of the mechanical methods, that is hygroscopic dilators, these may cause fetal or maternal infection. So these are the most complications of the dilators. See, these are the cervical dilators. We'll insert the tents into the os. And the other method is a transcervical Foley's placement. The technique of the balloon placement, after sterilization and the draping, the catheter is introduced into the potential space between the amniotic membrane and the lower uterine segment, and then the balloon of the catheter is inflated, that is around 30 to 50 ml of normal saline is inflated into the balloon, and then it is retracted out. I mean, we'll withdraw it out, and then we'll rest the catheter over the internal os, and catheter is stapled to the thigh. And then how does this catheter will be removed means, this is removed either at the time of rupture of membranes, or if there is or these catheter can be expelled spontaneously. If it is expelled spontaneously means, that is the dilatation of the cervix will be around 3 to 4 centimeters. The image is not clear. And the next method of mechanical method of dilatation of cervix is stripping of the membranes. Will detach the membranes at the level of inferior pole from the lower uterine segment. So this will release the prostaglandins, and it will initiate the labor. And coming to the risks of the stripping of membranes, there will be patient discomfort. The patient can complain of pain, either infection can be present, and bleeding from undiagnosed placenta previa or low-lying placenta can be seen, and accidentally rupture of membranes may occur with stripping of membranes. So this is stripping of membrane. We'll introduce a finger into the lower uterine segment, and we'll strip the membranes from the lower uterine segment. And next, coming to the pharmacological methods, we'll use a prostaglandin analogs. Mostly we'll use a prostaglandin E2 and then followed by E1. The prostaglandin E2, the component is a dinoprost. We'll call it as a dinoprost. This can either be, we can get it through either in the form of gel, insert, or a tablet form. Generally, we'll use a gel, a 0.5 mg of dinoprost in a 2.5 ml syringe. This is the syringe. We'll have a 0.5 mg of drug here. We'll introduce into intracervical, and we'll introduce the gel into the intracervical portion. And then we have to repeat it every 6th hourly for a maximum of 3 doses in 24 hours. After that, we have to go with either other method, or we'll go, depending upon the favorability, we'll go with the other methods. Coming to the insert, dinoprost insert, 10 mg of vaginal insert is inserted, which releases 0.3 mg per hour drug. So this is the insert. And followed by prostaglandin E2, we'll go with the oxytocin induction. If after cervical ripening, for augmentation, we'll go with the oxytocin. And the next pharmacological induction of labor, the method is a misoprostol, that is E1. It can be given either oral, vaginal, or sublingual. Coming to the dosage of the misoprostol, it is 25 micrograms, 3 to 6 hourly we have to give, and oxytocin should not be administered. It should be administered after 4 hours of the dose. Suppose we have given a misoprostol dose at around 12, we have to give oxytocin at around 4. And coming to the contraindications, patients who have underwent previous cesarean section, in such cases we have to we should not give a misoprostol, because there will be increased risk of uterine rupture. Coming to the complications of use of prostaglandin analogs, These prostaglandin E2, that is Dinoprost gel or insert, we have a incidence of uterine tachysystole that is around 1% in the gel form, and in insert we have 5%. What is tachysystole means? If a contractions, uterine contractions of more than 6 are there in over a 10-minute period, we'll call it as a tachysystole. And patients who are having a glaucoma or severe hepatic or renal dysfunction or asthma, we should not use this E2. And coming to the PGE1, that is misoprostol, complications will be tachysystole and meconium stained liquor will be there, and more chance of uterine rupture will be there with the misoprostol. And this is the we have discussed so far for an induction of labor with unfavorable cervix. So that so these are all the drugs where we can do cervical ripening. Now, if the cervix is a favorable, then we'll go with induction and augmentation of labor, either with the oxytocin or we can go with the stripping of the membranes. See, this is the oxytocin. It is the first polypeptide hormone and it is synthesized in 1955. The half-life of this oxytocin is around 5 minutes, and the uterine response will occur within 3 to 5 minutes of induction, and the plasma steady state will be reached in around 40 minutes. So coming to the regimens of the oxytocin, we'll use a 10 unit international units in 1000 ml, that is 1 liter of oral, and will induce the patient. We have two regimens, that is low dose and high dose oxytocin regimen for stimulation of labor. So coming to the low dose, we'll start 0.5 to 1 milli international units per minute, or either 1 to 2 milli international units per minute, and we'll increase the dose with 1 milli international units per minute. And the interval between increasing the dose will be around 30 to 40, or if we are using a 1 to 2 milli international units per minute, then we'll increase the dose around with 15-minute interval. And if we are using a high dose, then starting dose will be 6 milli international units per minute, and we'll increase the dose of 6 milli international units per minute, and every 15 minutes we'll increase the dose, or either 20 to 40 minutes depending upon the incremental increase. So this is the method of oxytocin in low dose regimen diluted in 1 liter of oil or NS, and we'll start an infusion rate of 1 to 4 milli international units per ml, and then we'll check a uterine contractions. If there is adequate uterine contractions, then we'll maintain the dose at this. If the uterine contractions are not adequate, that is, if there are adequate uterine contractions, means we have to get 3 to 4 contractions over a period of 10 minutes, which lasts for 30 to 40 seconds. So if there are not adequate, then we'll go with the titration and we'll increase the dose. So this is the adequate contractions, 3 to 4 contractions over 10 minutes for duration of 45 seconds. And generally we'll achieve adequate contractions at a dose of 10 to 12 milli international units per minute. And the drip, it is discontinued. This oxytocin drip is discontinued if we have a uterine contractions of more than 5 in a 10-minute period or 7 in a 15 minutes period. And uterine contractions, if they are lasting for more than 60 seconds, will discontinue. And if fetal heart, when it is a non-reassuring fetal heart, then also we'll discontinue the oxytocin drip and we'll wait and watch. Then complications with oxytocin will be the water intoxication. And the next method, it is the amniotomy. That is, we'll rupture the membranes. This is to stimulate or to accelerate the onset of labor, and it is a painless procedure. This amniotomy, it is either for induction of labor, it implies a commitment to the delivery, and it is unpredictable, and occasionally long interval to onset of contractions will be there. And for accelerating the labor also, we can go with the amniotomy. And for direct monitoring of fetal heart, that is internal monitoring of the fetal heart, we'll go with the amniotomy. Complications with amniotomy, that is rupture of membranes. With rupture of membranes, we can either see a cord prolapse or cord compression pattern follows amniotomy. Then we'll go with the cesarean section if fetal distress is not decreased, and infection may be there because we are rupturing the membranes, and rupture of the vasa previa will be seen. In some cases with the vasa previa, there will be rupture of vasa previa. And before going, we have to assess the fetal heart, and immediately after amniotomy also, we have to monitor fetal heart. So this is all about the induction of labor. So far we have discussed what is the definition of induction of labor, what is the definition of cervical ripening, what are the indications for induction of labor, and what are the complications, what are the contraindications, and methods of ripening and methods of induction of labor. For ripening, we can go with the mechanical methods or we can go with the pharmacological methods with prostaglandin analogs. And mechanical methods, we can go with the hygroscopic dilators or a balloon catheter, or we can go with the mechanical stripping of the membranes. And for induction of labor, augmentation of labor, we can go with oxytocin, and we can go with the amniotomy. Most common complications with analogs of prostaglandins will be tachycystole. That is, there will be more stimulation of the uterine contractions. So this is the most common complication. And infection rate will also be more with the mechanical methods. This is all about the induction of labor. If you're having any doubts, you can message me or you can ask me. If you're not having any doubts, we'll end the meeting.